Greetings, YouTube. Alan Lube is back with the Fab content. Been a while. I've been haven't really played too much Flesh and Blood since Worlds, but this last Proquest was really enjoyable. As you may or may not have known, I recently moved down to Southern California, so that took up a lot of my time in the month of December and the holidays and such. But getting back to Proquest and experiencing the Fab community just reminded me of why we all love this game so much. And so I'm not sure how I clickbaited the YouTube video yet, but I'm pretty sure that I wrote first place. Technically in Alan, or no, I might have not put it first. I probably put Alan wins Proquest. And while that is technically true, I did not win the Proquest. I actually became runner-up. I lost to Alan Shavarin. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. On Icelander. And he played very well. I made some, well, I don't know about some mistakes, but I made one very big mistake looking back on the game. That might have changed the outcome. I'm not sure, but it's definitely eating at me, but it is what it is. Anyways, so I just wanted to show you my Bravo deck tech. I'm very happy with how I performed, with how I played overall. I just think that, if I just put more time into playing the different matchups, I probably would have, or the matchups I wasn't as comfortable with, I probably would have maybe taken it all the way. I'm not sure, but so let's get right into it. As per usual, we have Bravo, we have Anathos, Crater Fist, Crown of Providence, Iron Rot Legs, Tectonic Plating. Pretty standard equipment loadout. You're going to use this in most of your games, if not all of your games. You'll probably switch out Null Rune for like Briar and Viscerai, and then versus Icelander, you just have like the full Null Rune. Going into the Reds, also pretty standard: Chokeslam, CNC, Crippling, Pummel, Sink, Spinal. Those were what I would consider to be like the main core of the deck. So this deck, it doesn't really have a core of 58 cards. Like, I will take out some of these cards depending on the matchup, but these are what I would be considered to be like the necessity of a Bravo deck. Blue Pummel, I remember taking out 2 Blue Pummels to try and see how I felt, especially for Guardian Mirrors, because I don't find Blue Pummel that impactful in the matchup. But I figured that Blue Pummel was important for other matchups where I need to be as disruptive as possible. Going into the blues, all pretty standard: Buckling Blow, Perennial Crush. I run 1 blue Crush of the week, and that's because for this deck, I run just 40 blues in basically every single matchup except for Icelander. But we'll talk about that on the sideboard. And then Debilitate, Disable, Imposing Visage, Macho Grande, Rouse, Showtime, Terra Sunder, Thunderquake, Unmovable. Unmovable. There was a time where I took out Unmovable. That was like 6 months ago. And now in the current meta that we're in, with a lot more Guardians, I would say, and decks that play a little bit slower, like you see an uptick of Dory as well, I think Unmovable is pretty good in the deck. There was a time where this was staunch, but for the Guardian Mirror, Unmovable is definitely better. So yeah, all of this is pretty stock standard. I know some decks will go 39 blues, and that's totally fine. 39 blues is perfectly fine. I played with 39 blues for like a year. But I went up to 40 recently, and I've been liking it more. I found that it's only 1 blue card difference, and this is probably anecdotal, but there were so many games where I would just draw like 4 reds, and that was probably due to poor sideboarding as well. But yeah, 40 blues, it's nice and simple. You never need to take out anything. But yeah, let's move on to the sideboard. So sideboard's a little funky. For the most part, I don't like one-ofs in decks because it just kind of feels like, well, what's this really doing here if it's a one-of? But I'll talk about it in a bit. So for Icelander, we have Tunic and the 3 Null Rune. The thing about Icelander is that 95% of the time, if I see an Icelander in Proquest, I'm 95% certain they're on like a Wounded Bull, Michael Hamilton-esque list. Like, not that many decks play the pure, arcane damage, Frost Hex Icelander anymore. So against the Bullander, Tunic is very important if they run Coronet Peak. If they don't run Coronet Peak, then you should run Tectonic Plating because you get, that 3 health, and your Seismic Surges actually do help because Bullander or Hamilton's Icelander doesn't really disrupt as much as it just tries to get its value out of its cards. So I think for the most part, though, Tunic is just the correct choice. You never know what they're going to do, and you can try to, metagame them and be like, oh, I know you're going to run Crown of Providence into me, so I'm going to run Tectonic Plating, but I don't know. I just go Tunic. I think it's fine. It also helps with Outmuscle, which is another card that I tried out at the Proquest, and it performed fine. The matchups that it's important for are Kano, Icelander, Dash, and Dromai. and I didn't play any of those matchups except for Icelander. So it's kind of it worked out for the most part, but my big misplay was playing this instead of a different card and getting it blocked by a Wounded Bull, and then I lost all sense of tempo and advantage I had in that game. One Fate Foreseen. Stupid notifications. So I have one Fate Foreseen just because I don't know. Recently I took out Fate Foreseen completely, but I added one back in just because I had the one slot. And versus Guardian, I felt like, just having one Fate Foreseen is nice. If they see it in your grave, then they're like, oh, maybe he has more. But I just have the one. Having more just feels like it kind of breaks your hands a lot, especially in like versus Fire or Briar. You'll like crippling them or spinal them or something, and they'll block out. And then you draw up and you draw like a Sink and a Fate in the same hand, and you're like, okay, I just kind of lose from here. So yeah, one I think is fine. I've seen decks run two as well. Two is also fine. Three, I personally would not run three at this moment. Two Pulverize, I think for the most part three is overkill, but is also fine. But I think one is not enough for the Guardian Mirror. I think that Pulverize is probably one of the most important cards to have been printed for Guardian, specifically for the Guardian Mirror. I don't know what it is about this card, but just the fact, ever since it's been printed, it felt like Guardian Mirrors have sped up a lot. The fact that decks can't really afford to play it slow anymore, but that's also because decks aren't running like 12 to 15 defense reacts anymore. But I think just Pulverize is just so powerful of a card in the Guardian Mirror that like I value it almost on the same level as like a Crippling Crush in terms of like I don't want to block with this. I want to either pitch it or just find some way to play this. And then Thunderquake. So, oh yeah, I forgot to mention. This is going to be like a part one. I'm going to come out with another Bravo video with Patrick Requejo, who got second at the Calling San Jose. Me and him are friends, and we talk a lot about Bravo. And, one thing that was very notable about his Calling San Jose list was that he ran 3 red unmovables. And so this Thunderquake took the slot of those red unmovables. I think red unmovable is also perfectly fine in the Guardian Mirror, and it also helps versus Dorinthia. But for me personally, I was more worried about decks like Dash and Icelander, so I took those slots and instead put Thunderquake because just a big 6 for 10 is like good enough, honestly. Zealous Belting, of course, it's been in the deck since like Monarch came out for Prism, and it's kind of just staying in the deck for any time you needed just a matchup that you needed to go faster. I also run it specifically only in the Bravo Mirror, not in the Oldhim matchup, because Oldhim will just ice react you, whereas in Bravo, 3 cards for 11 is like an amazing rate. So you kind of just, I don't know, I feel like you kind of have to play it. It sucks when they come at you with like something important, like a Naked Crippling or something, and you're forced to block with Zealous Belting. That's probably the worst part, but it's the same reason like you play Pummel, like you still want to play the card even though it blocks 2, and sometimes you're just gonna have to block with it and give up on that value. And then 2 blue Staunch Response. This is kind of just 2 extra blues for the Icelander matchup. I really don't want to be bricking hands with reds versus Icelander. And also 2 blue Staunch Response was also in my deck for the Guardian Mirror. I specifically took out 2 blue Pummels for Staunch Response. So that's okay. That's some part of the blue package that you do take out. But yeah, for Icelander, just put them in, take out some reds like Sinks or something. And then for Guardian, I would take out 2 blue Pummels, put in 2 Staunch. Another important thing to note is that before this tournament, I would have usually gone up to around 65 cards in the Guardian Mirror. But recently, I talked to Patrick about it also, and he put me on to just playing a straight 60. Like, these games don't go the distance anymore. And sure, you will hit your second cycle, maybe even a third cycle, depending how the match turns out, but you are unlikely to deck out, especially since the Pulse of Isenloft nerf. Oldhims aren't really fatiguing anymore. They're more on Sledge, and even if they're on Whale Rampart, that's honestly, it's like in a perfect game against Whale Rampart, it will 100% go to time. I definitely will want to play faster when I see Whale Rampart in order to not go to time, and that just kind of makes my play worse in terms of like counting my pitch stack, tracking their pitch stack, and also counting threats, things like that. So I don't know. If you want to draw, play Whale Rampart. If you want to, it's kind of like a meme. You know how in like anime where it's like someone comes to a fight with a weapon and the other person's like, drop your weapon, let's fight like men. It's kind of like that. If you want to fight like that, you play Sledge. But anyways, I went on a little tangent there. I don't want to talk too much about the specifics of the deck and also what cards we don't run, what cards we considered running, because I want to save that for another video with Patrick. But this is just the deck as a whole. I'll leave a link in the description. In terms of if I would change anything for my next Proquest, the thing that I am most looking to change would probably be Outmuscle. I'm sort of on and off about how I feel about the card. It also depends on, what matchups I expect to see at the Proquest. If I see an uptick of like Dash and Dromai, then Outmuscle will probably stay. But they both can definitely tech for the card. Like Dromai will definitely have 6 power cards. Dash definitely has 6 power cards that can just eat your turn. And whiffing on an Outmuscle is like pretty damaging. So saving a Pummel to try and like bump its power up is also pretty important for the card. And that's also why 6 Pummel's back in. So let's talk about the matchups I faced. This is going to be like a little Proquest tournament report. Let me just see if I can pull that up real quick. Let's see. Matchups. Here we go. So these were my matchups, and I'm just going to talk about them one by one, or 2 by 2, because the first 2 rounds I faced were Royal Briar, and those were both wins. I feel like Royal Briar is worse than regular Briar in the Bravo matchup because the Crown of Providence armor just matters too much. If you want to beat Bravo as Briar, in my opinion, just like run Crown of Providence, throw in 3 sinks, and then just play it slower. Like if they dominate Spinal, hopefully you have that sink line up. Or if they like try to naked crippling you, then you just, block 8, come back 0 for 4, and just wait for them to run out of gas, because they eventually will. And if Bravo hits, he just hits. Like there's nothing you can do about it. But just playing to your most consistent out is probably the way to go. So that's my advice for Briar. But don't tell him I said that, because Briar I feel like is one of Bravo's worst matchups. And by worst, I mean I don't necessarily mean it's unfavored. I just think it means that it's the one. It's probably the only matchup that I think has a clear edge versus Bravo. Round 3, I played a Bravo Mirror. This is also a win. I was pretty confident in my deck and how it plays, and I know what to do in that matchup, so I felt pretty comfortable there. Round 4, I played Lexi. I actually played Chris Iali on Lexi. I was actually really nervous about this matchup because I've played a lot of Lexi before. Like if you look in the history of this channel, I'm sure there might be gameplay with like me playing Yuki or something, or me playing Oliver. And I played Lexi a ton back then. But I was nervous because actually the Thursday before Proquest, I went to an armory, and someone who had just picked up the game, who had just picked up Lexi for the first time, almost beat the crap out of me. And I was super nervous. I kind of top decked a Pummel for the win. And so I was really nervous. But what I found with Lexi is that it almost feels like the players who have played Lexi more, I find to be more comfortable playing against, because they take their time more, they set up more, they'll like pitch stack a Rain Razors, they'll pitch stack like a 3 of a kind or something for later, because they know that Guardian can just fatigue them. But I think against any good player, fatigue is not a viable I take that back. Versus Lexi, fatigue is pure fatigue, I think, is a very scary strategy, because the best of players will probably overcome that. But the issue is that when you try to set up to not get fatigued as Lexi, that gives Bravo windows to disrupt you, to play a Spinal, to play a CNC, and that just like messes up your turns. I have found that the scariest moments, or the games where I lose as Lexi, is when they just go balls to the wall, never stop. They just hit all their cards. They activate Perch Grapplers for the effect instead of blocking, and they just swing, and I never get to do anything. But for the most part, it's definitely still Bravo favored, so got the win there. Round 5 is when I played Alan for the first time. Alan Chavarin, SoCal Alan. I guess I'm NorCal Alan, but I lost there. It wasn't particularly close. At the end of the game, the life was close. It was 1-1, but it was one of those situations where he dropped down to 1 in order to close out the game. And I felt like the entire game, it didn't really feel like there was a window for me to win. I just think I didn't quite draw. I mean, I don't want to chalk it up to like the cards I drew, right? But I don't know. There's definitely more experience in that matchup that I need to learn. But it didn't felt like I hit the cards I needed, and like the go again cards or like the big attack cards. So didn't get the win there. And then around 6, I played Craig Pollock on Oldham, and I was pretty nervous because I know Craig is like pretty famous for playing Guardian down here. But the matchup was really close. He was on Sledge, and I didn't know how much time in the round there was left. But since it was like a Guardian matchup, I assumed that we were getting close. So I kind of just went for an all-in play and I got punished. I don't know if I had played it slower if I would have won. I still think he might have had the edge there because I kind of ran out of threats in my deck, but my deck was larger. And that's kind of how the Guardian matchup goes sometimes. It's like the person who's playing out their threats thins the deck of the opponent faster, but if you run out of threats, it's really hard to close the game. And Oldhim, just in general, with Tunic and Sludge, can just outvalue you pretty hard. But yeah, I wasn't sure how many cards he was running or anything. Didn't ask him that, but got the loss there. So I ended Swiss 4-2. I was locked after round 4 because I was 4-0, and it was less than 64 players in 6 rounds. So I knew I was going to get top 8. And I actually knew, like, right after round 6, like, I looked around to see, like, what the seeds were going to be, and I knew I was going to get a rematch with Craig in top 8. So that was exciting, another Guardian Mirror. But I was kind of more prepared this time because I had just played him. But at the same time, the game went much different than our game in Swiss. In our game in Swiss, I felt like I had sort of the initiative. I was playing my cards, but there were 2 Crippling Crushes that I had stacked in my deck, and it took me forever to get to them. I did not get to them. So in this second game, I didn't want to make that mistake. I was like, I had a Crippling Crush in Arsenal, and I drew, 3 blues and a Crippling, and I was like, this is probably my shot to go for it, where I can chain Cripplings. So I dominated Crippling, Arsenal the Crippling, and then I draw up again, but I only see 2 blues and 2 reds. So at that point, I had a choice of either playing a naked Crippling, but not making a Surge, or playing a red Thunderquake while making a Surge. I went for the Thunderquake play so I could keep a Surge, but that ended up being a mistake because he kind of just ate it and came at me with the Pulverize, and I lost all tempo. And from there, he kind of had the tempo for the most part, and it was just me blocking out. We were both getting really low, just playing our most efficient cards like Rouse, Thunderquake, etc. But it got to the point where we were both on low health, but I had armor and he didn't have as much armor because he was running Snapdragons also. And he was running Crown of Seas, doesn't have armor. Tunic doesn't really block. I mean, it has 1 block, but not really. And then he had already blocked once on Crater Fist, whereas I had all my armor except Crowd of Providence. It got to the point where I found Rouse the Ancients and Pulverize in the same hand, but with no other attacks. It was like 2 blue defense reactions. So at that point, I was able to make the play of playing Rouse the Ancients, revealing Pulverize, coming in for 13 on that turn, and arsenaling Pulverize. Now, that was kind of scary because I wasn't sure if I was going to get that Pulverize out of Arsenal. But because we were both low, as long as I swung for Hammer for 6 every turn, I could just wait for a hand with 4 blues, and then full block his Hammer with armor, and then come in with a dominated Pulverize for the game. So that's how I got that one. It also helped that at one point in the game, he drew into like 3 red Pummel, and that lost him all the tempo that he had gained previously from playing Pulverize. So I think the Guardian matchup has evolved a lot. I haven't like kept up as much, but I think Pulverize is just one of those cards that really makes the matchup different from how it was in like the Monarch or Tales of Aria days. Moving on, in the next round, I had another Bravo Mirror. This Bravo Mirror is different from the one I played in Swiss. He was 5-1, his only loss being in round 6 to the same Icelander that I lost to, Alan. Alan. But let's see. I could tell he was a little tired. He made some small like mistakes that like didn't necessarily cost them the game, but the fatigue was settling in for sure, and for me also. But I think I was also just pretty comfortable with the matchup, so I ended up getting the win. I wouldn't say like it was a stomp or anything. It was very close, I would say, on both sides, but I did feel comfortable for the most part. It never felt like I needed to do anything drastic to come back into the game, so it was just kind of smooth sailing. And then in the final round, it was a rematch, the Icelander rematch versus Alan, the same one I lost to in Swiss. He's undefeated in the day. And this entire time, all 3 of these matches, I was the lower seed, so I didn't get to pick turn. So once again, I'm going second against Icelander. And as I said earlier, I ended up losing this one. It was really close. There was one turn where I had a Crippling in Arsenal and an Outmuscle in hand, and instead of just playing out the Crippling, I played out the Outmuscle. I was too nervous about him doing stuff on my turn that I wanted to save cards in hand, but I should have identified the fact that he didn't have enough to kill me that turn, and also that Crippling would have been much more effective at pressuring both his life and trying to win the game. So I was definitely a little bit on autopilot there. I don't want to blame it on like fatigue or anything. It's mainly just my inexperience in the matchup. But yeah, overall happy with how I did. Got second place at a Proquest, but just being so close, and then knowing that there was a specific play that I could have done differently is like it's pretty gut wrenching. But it is what it is. That's how it goes. I will be going to more Proquests. There are 6 Proquests happening in my area that I could go to, but honestly, going to 2 in a weekend is like a bit too much for me right now. Like I'm still settling in for my move, work and all that other stuff. So I'll probably just go to 1 a week. And I'll be satisfied with that. So yeah, this was my deck tech. You guys can go ahead and comment if you have any questions. But just know I will definitely be coming back with another video with Patrick. He will also be showing his Bravo deck. I mean, we're on very similar lists, but he does have some slight differences. And we'll also talk about, a lot of the choices we made and stuff like that. So yeah, excited to be back making fab content again. And thanks for watching. Subscribe, like the video, comment, share it with your friends, show it to your mom.